Okay, it says the recording's in progress. I'm gonna say got it there. I just had to agree, I guess.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
I do, absolutely.
Well, it's good to see you this morning, my friend.
Yeah. Any way I can help, I'm glad to. It's the least I can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hello there, Polly.
Hey, oh, Polly, you're here too. Hi. Oh, this is my neck warmer.
I know it's warmed up. I already knew that. In the microwave.
Yep, that's it.
We should all be so lucky that we have a Polly that will.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. She's amazing.
Yeah. How's the weather? Is it chilly?
It's cool and looks like it could rain, but we're supposed to meet with somebody outside this morning, so let's hope it doesn't.
Yeah, yeah, it's morning. It's 7 a.m. where you are.
It is, yeah, early. I'm an early bird. I was up this morning, Ron, at 5:30, getting set up to meditate with a Cambridge Mass group that I try to connect with. Cambridge Insight Meditation Center.
Yeah.
They're really great.
Did you make it?
I did.
How was that?
It's always wonderful when I can be up for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm going to do a Monday evening weekly session also with an 88-year-old guru named Larry Rosenberg, who's just amazing.
Nice.
For me, meditation, it's critical. I really need it. It helps a lot.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish more people would take advantage of, what's available to them like that. But for many, it's just foreign. For many, it's hard to get through the head chatter already.
Yeah.
Yet that, like anything, takes practice. And there's all forms of meditation, which is really beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's just finding someone to sit with and to, even if it's not meditation, visualizations can be really, really good. If someone can guide you or listen to CDs or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've sometimes listened to ones you've created.
Yeah, we've got some out there.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question if I can.
Yeah.
Since I've known you, or since you've known myself and Compassionate Care ALS, what's the benefit that you've seen through our organization? What do you derive from the connection that we have with another?
Well, part of it is the connection that I have with you that has developed. I really value that hugely. Maybe that's like right at the top, just because there's so much to take in about what's going on, and having your perspective, it just is very reassuring and calming. Also, you have been right there whenever I've had some physical need or question, like the wheelchair ramp and the wheelchair and the walker. All of those have made huge differences in my quality of life pretty much every day. That's significant. Yeah. And then, like we're going back east this summer, and you're going to be checking out the place we're going. And it's just amazing, Ron. It really is.
So would you say the art of language, how we speak, the words that we use, how we articulate what we're sharing is important?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you're coming back east, and I'll be going up there to your niece. Is it your niece or cousin?
Niece.
Niece. Your niece is home, just to double check to make sure you'll have what you need, and we'll figure all that out. I think it's later in July.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah,
Mm,
so for another conversation, we'll navigate that, but everything will
yep.
be in place. And of course, we'll talk even before you get on the airplane, about what you need, what it's all going to look like, how you navigate the plane, et cetera, et cetera, et
Mm,
cetera.
no.
I know you were thinking about a feeding tube, G tube.
Yes.
Yeah, where are you
It's
at?
more than thinking about it. I've been, I went to the last ALS clinic last week. Polly and I went, and I kept hearing again and again people would say, it's time, really, it's getting to be time. Do it soon. You'll appreciate it. The pulmonologist came in and he said, well, last time when we met many months ago, I said, no rush. We need to have these things going on. Your numbers have to get worse. You have to be vaccinated. And there was one other, and basically all of the, and weight loss, if you lose weight. So I've been losing weight. My breathing numbers went down and I'm vaccinated. So he said, we checked all the boxes. It's time. Even that didn't convince me. What did convince me was a talk I had with a palliative care doc who said, the feeding tube will give you a better quality of life because you won't have to struggle with eating and drinking, and that'll free up time and energy. You'll have more energy. I liked that. It was like kind of not like it's time you need to do this, but why it would be good.
Hmm.
So that's what I decided. And we were even thinking maybe before going back east, but seems like too much of a stretch. So we'll do it after, I think, in
Yeah.
August,
Um,
if
I,
I can do it then.
yeah. Would you like to know what I know about feeding tubes?
Yes, and which kind? There's Mickeys and Minis and Pegs, and you know,
Yeah,
somebody
well,
said, well, if you get a Mickey, you've got to be careful because it can pop out and you got to get it right back in, just wash it off well and get it back in. I thought, great, what if I'm gardening and, am I going to pull it off of the ground? And
okay.
anyway,
Well, that would be the question you want to talk to the gastro people, whoever's doing the procedure. And
yeah.
you want to know that prior. And sometimes my understanding is they don't know until they get you in there. Okay.
Mm, okay.
Exactly what that's going to look like. But you really do want to educate yourself, whether it's the Mickey. I've had some people that love it. And I've heard along the way that sometimes they can't do that first. They have to do something else in order to do the button later.
Uh,
So those are
okay.
questions you need to
Yeah.
ask. There's
Okay.
many different delivery systems. You want to educate yourself around that. In my
Mm,
personal experience, I favor the clock. It's on an IV pole. There's a clock that you can sit, watch TV, listen to music. It's a
oh,
slow entry, and you can
uh-huh.
cut it off if you want. Okay.
Okay.
Opposed to bolus, which is like a plunger, goes right in
Mm,
really fast, which
mm,
can sometimes overwhelm the body, okay, or the
mm,
belly. And then there's a gravity bag. And I guess most people probably have the gravity bag. And
mm.
we've got an interesting contraption that can assist with that. So where you can actually set the bag down here, someone doesn't have to be holding it out here. Okay. So you just want to educate yourself as to what all that looks like.
And how do I do that? Go online, you mean,
Well,
and
you
look
can
at a
go
video?
online. Well, there's a wonderful feeding tube website called olayfoundation.com.
Hmm.
Olation, Olay,
Olay?
as in what's the name of the company? Oil of Olay.
Oh,
Olay,
yes.
it's that family, olayfoundation.org. It's a
Okay,
feeding
let me.
tube website. It's quite possible you'll see information that you're seeking there. You'll learn about many feeding tube formulas. Okay.
Polly, maybe I should let you listen, but you might want to listen. Are you in earshot?
Yep.
Okay. I was just talking about feeding tubes, and I'm gonna write this down, Ron.
Well, I'll send it to you as well. Okay.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, but Olay Foundation. Whoops. I need a quick note-taking form.
I got you. I'll send it to you.
Olay Foundation. I know, but okay, got it.
All right.
Yep.
So here's my feeding tube shtick.
Okay.
The vast majority of the time, a feeding tube procedure. Oops, lost you.
I'm coming back there.
The vast majority of the time, the feeding tube procedure is a piece of cake. Vast majority of the time, simple procedure. That said, a procedure is still a procedure. So you're not going to know until you get there and they see you. The pulmonary people or the gastro people will determine whether they give you a general anesthesia where they put you to sleep, or they do what some refer to as twilight.
Yep.
People who are more compromised with their lung capacity and breathing, they prefer to do twilight. Okay. So that's something you also want to speak to them about. Already. So, over the years, I've truly learned not to be attached to what any choice anyone makes.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And for me, it's just important for people to have all the information they wish to make in order to make a conscious choice and decision. All right. Mm-hmm. My sense is you've already done that, which I admire and respect you for. Mm-hmm. That said, what does it mean to say yes to a feeding tube, and what does it mean to say no? What the doctor shared with you, the palliative care doc, was right on. Okay. And yet I'm going to go a little further. Again, what does it mean to say yes, and what does it mean to say no? Many, many, many years ago, early in my career, one of my friends went in for a feeding tube procedure, and they sent him home the same day. And that evening, he had some issues, was rushed back to the hospital. He called me late that night or early the next morning. And Ron, why didn't somebody fricking tell me that could happen? Right? Anytime there's a procedure, stuff can happen. Now, setting aside that the vast majority of the time, this is quite a simple procedure. I had one gentleman I hadn't talked to in a while. I happened to call him up. He answers the phone, sounded great. We're talking. He said, oh, by the way, Ron, I had a feeding tube done the other day. I said, when? He says, a couple of days ago. I said, and you didn't tell me? We were friends, and, he said, oh, it was okay. I said, all right, great. And we were talking a bit. And then I heard some noise in the background. I said, where are you? He says, I'm in Ireland. I'm like, excuse me? I mean, he had a feeding tube done the day before. Now he's in Ireland. Okay. That's how simple it can sometimes be. Wow. The vast majority of the people, regardless of the type of feeding tube apparatus they have in their belly, you wouldn't even know they have a feeding tube. Okay. I mean, it's covered by your clothing. A feeding tube is an insurance policy. All right. Because again, if your swallowing does become diminished and it starts slowing down, then you have a feeding tube to take your nutrition, not just your nutrition, but your meds. Now, I've known people who've had feeding tubes, and frankly, they never used them. Ever. I've had people who've had feeding tubes that said, you know what? I've had it for 2 years. I've never used it. I'm taking it out because I know what I don't want to do going forward with my life. All right. They knew what the ramifications of that choice would be, that they lost the ability to swallow, right? Right. So, there's many ways and many choices.
Mm.
Some of the questions you might want to really ask, alrighty, ask this palliative care doc again. You know, I understand all the benefits of what it means to say yes. Can you please tell me what it means to say no? In other words, what can go wrong? Tell me what can go wrong, right? And for some people, that can be scary, but I'm a huge proponent of what does it mean to say yes and what does it mean to say no? I have known people who had a very weak voice. Their concern was, will I lose my voice if I have this procedure done? And sometimes I've known people who did lose their voice. They did general, and it was some, who knows why, but they lost their voice. And then I've known people with very weak voices, and they were quite fine the majority of the time afterwards. Okay. Can I continue to eat if I have the feeding tube? If you were to have a feeding tube tomorrow and everything was well, you're still eating, of course you can still eat. A lot of people don't know that, but of course you can. Sometimes I've met people whose swallowing and breathing still seemed okay enough, but the doctors convinced them not to eat for fear of
choking, maybe.
Yeah, aspiration.
Oh, yes.
Aspirating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've had some concerns about that a bit, but
Yeah. And again, when you're eating, you just want to lower your head, less chance of aspirating, and food is easier to swallow. And again, while you're still eating, if chewing becomes tiring,
it does.
I'll send you a mini Cuisinart. You pulse the food up. Chicken is still chicken. Beef is still beef. It's just texturized. It's just not pureed, but it saves lots of chewing. I don't know that you're there, but sometimes people are, and it just makes a huge difference.
My other sent me one of those, and we use it mostly I was using it for salads, but
awesome.
I don't think I can do salads anymore. But
At night.
At night, but for meat, I've never tried with meat.
The next time you do chicken or beef, cut it up, throw it in, pulse it, so it's still textured.
Okay.
It's a lot less chewing involved.
That's great, because the chewing is very tiring.
Oh, yeah. So, Polly, next time, pulse it up. Don't puree it, but pulse it. Okay.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, and I share this with a few people, not everyone all the time. I've known some people who we lost on the table because of a feeding tube procedure. Stuff happens. It's just like childbirth.
Right. Yeah.
Again, the vast majority of the time, it's a piece of cake.
Yep.
There are a lot of people I've known over the years who are hesitant. My friend John Imbert. I think I've told you about John. John was considered the finest painter. Considered the finest contemporary painter in America. We became really close, like you and I have become very close. And John did not want a feeding tube. Very clear, And a year plus down the road, things were starting to move along. He had a much faster progression than you. Swallowing was becoming difficult. You could hear, he couldn't cough things up. Breathing was becoming more difficult. I was visiting, I knew he was irritated, agitated, pulling his hair out mode, So I knew it was up. Jill, his wife, had gone out. It was just the two of us hanging out. I looked at him and said, John, you thinking about changing your mind? Because I knew it was up, just intuitively. And he's like, I don't know, Ron. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I said, okay. May I ask you a question, John? Yes. I said, are you ready to go? He looked at me. I said, you ready to die? He went, no. I said, then you've answered your question. Get the feeding tube. At some point, because at some point you're going to lose the ability to swallow. Now, obviously, if you can't swallow, and I would say the vast majority at that point in time, they're not going to do a procedure because the lung capacity is so low.
Right. Yeah.
And so he said yes. And then we talked about everything I just shared with you. This is what it can look like from my perspective. He talked to his doctors, had the procedure. And of course, I shared with him. And the one thing that did happen to him is it kicked him on his backside for a week. Okay. You know, I mean, it's a procedure. He was in bed for 3 or 4 days. It took him a little while to recuperate. Recently, a younger fellow who I work with, decided to have the procedure, and the doctor said yes, because sometimes they won't do it till you're at a certain point. Well, your lung capacity, I think maybe is at 50, or because that's where insurance will say yes. But he had good doctors. They found a reason to make it happen, right? And he's reaching out to me after. I didn't have this conversation with him, unfortunately. And or maybe in bits and pieces, but we never dropped into a place to spend some time. And it kicked him on his butt for a couple of weeks. After 3 or 4 days, Ron, how long is this going to last? After a week, what the hell? But after a couple of weeks, he was back to normal. So it's healing,
Yeah. You know, one thing that I did wonder about this morning, the last maybe few weeks, I've had a little discomfort in my gut. I loosen my belt or whatever, I pull down my pajama bottoms even at night sometimes. And it helps, but I thought, I wonder how that's gonna be. So I'll mention it to the doc maybe. It may not be a concern at all, but it's just, I realized it's right where that thing would go.
Yeah. And sometimes they don't know where it goes. I had one family not long ago, a gentleman went in, they ended up not being able to do it because his stomach was in a weird place. So who knows, right?
Yeah. Wow. Well, one thing that somebody suggested, I think is a good idea, is make an appointment if we can to see the doc before we leave, so that when we get back, we're kind of ready to do it.
Sure. And well, you're also going to be having an appointment with MGH. Has that gotten booked yet?
I don't know that it has.
Have you registered yet?
I've registered.
All right,
yes.
I'll follow up. I will follow up. And what's the dates you're here again, please?
July. When do we arrive?
We arrive on the 18th of July and we leave on the 6th of August.
But we arrive at night, right?
We arrive at
No,
night.
that's fine. All right, we'll make it sometime in the middle. All right.
And we're hoping to go up to Squam Lake the last week in July.
Well,
yeah,
I'll just make sure they get in touch with you and you guys can figure that out. Okay.
Great.
Again, Gordon, who I took care of in 1997, was very adamant, no feeding tube, nothing. No, there's no BiPAP machine. We didn't have anything like that,
Yeah.
And of course, Gordon lost the ability to swallow. All right. We were at the Silver Lounge Thursday night, prime rib night. There's this watering hole. He was in town for 30 years every Thursday night. That's where he would be. At the piano bar with friends. And they would cut food up really, really small. Well, this particular night, the napkins were literally piled up this high because it was just coming out.
Yeah. Yep.
And I looked up at him and he looks at me. I said, "Is this it?" And he said, "All right, let's see what happens in the morning." So morning comes, get him up, get him cleaned up. He's in his chair. I give him some Burple, which is a baby food dessert. And he could not swallow it. He couldn't swallow. All of his muscle, his ability was gone. He passed away 2 weeks later. Now, of course, Gordon being 6'4", a big man, even with all the weight loss, it was a process. That was my first experience of someone without taking nutrition. So in a broader sense, because part of the conversation along the way is people's ability to make a choice. And some people make the choice along the way to stop nutrition. And for some people, that can be incredibly foreign, incredibly scary. And are you kidding? It's like bringing up the word hospice. People are like this. Some. And of course, for me, there's no difference in Gordon losing the ability to swallow or Gordon a month or two prior, had we known, you could make a conscious choice to stop nutrition. It's the same process. One's just consciously saying the quality of my life is no longer what I want it to be, right? I mean, especially if you're not in a state where there's, not a right to die, program. But that's just one of the.
In Washington, state does have a right to die.
Yeah, well, that's a beautiful thing because that allows you another choice. See, oftentimes people don't think they have choice. And, I've met people, I've been doing this a long time, and I've known people who've made some choices that weren't very pretty and put many other people at risk and created incredible trauma for their family members because they chose to end their life in such a not so pleasant kind of a way. But there are choices. Many people don't know they don't have that they have a choice. So, even people, my buddy Jerry had the feeding tube and chose to take the feeding tube away. He had it for years and never used it.
Wow.
But he was really clear. I don't want it. If I get to this point, I'm not really interested in being around, right? So, but these are conversations that.
I guess I do feel that in terms of ventilator. I don't want one of those plug into your throat ventilators. Sure. I don't think.
Yeah.
But for eating, I have a pretty good quality of life still, and I have grandkids and Polly and friends.
Yeah. Well,
that's
I always like to
keep going for now.
Yeah. And which makes complete sense. And yet, even with ventilator, and I've really, over the years, I've learned to truly honor people's choices.
Yes.
Early, I didn't try to understand tracheotomies and invasive ventilations, why people would want to do that. I understand that now. And yet, it's about honoring people's choices, honoring where they were and supporting them, and also making sure they have the information that they need to make that conscious choice, right? And of course, invasive ventilation, all right, this is what it looks like, but the key component is what is the care component going to look like?
Yeah.
Because the vast majority of the time, and certainly not always, it's a 24-hour situation. You need 24-hour care. Not always, though. Like everything else, we got stories that would make your head spin how, people are, living in that circumstances, still eating and still speaking, which makes me wonder, why did they have the procedure done in the first place? Okay. And so again, I'm fortunate to know a particular pulmonary doctor who's extraordinary. And he and another gentleman who I know in the same field, they're firm believers that's last resort. And so from that perspective, oftentimes too many people make that choice and say yes to it actually before they need it.
Wow.
So, and again, what does the care component look like? That's a big piece.
Well, we have a really good pulmonary doc, and I would trust talking with him about it. We haven't at all, because I don't feel like I'm there or close, but and at the moment, I don't think I would do it, but it's good to keep an open mind, I guess.
My response to that is, how do you know until you're there?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, it's kind of like, I think if I'm dying tomorrow, I'm going to be good. But until I'm dying, how do I know what all this is going to look like?
You're right.
It's the same thing,
That's true.
And you can have your feeding tube procedure and it's a piece of cake, or something goes awry. I don't know, why did I do that? And you deal with it in the moment. And, in the US, I think it's 12 to 15% of folks with ALS say yes, or not say yes, but have tracheotomy, invasive ventilation, etc. Of that, I'd be willing to bet at least more than half of those that go there are rushed to the hospital. Okay. And because they can't breathe, and it's done in the midst of crisis and trauma, right?
Right.
Whereas the smaller percentage, okay, I'm ready to go do this now. You know, are we ready? You sure? Let's go. You know what I'm saying? Consciously make that
I
choice.
do.
And those outcomes are a whole lot better because people are preparing and they're doing their inquiry into what all this looks like. Okay. So again, I would invite you at some point when you're next time you see your pulmonary doctor, say, I'm curious about something.
Yeah.
I'm nowhere near ready, but what does that look like? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts
No,
on
I
it?
could do that with Dr. Kirtland. He'd be
Yeah.
open. Yeah.
Yeah. It's about self-exploration. It's about inquiry. And in my experience, those willing to do that, outcomes are so much better around everything. You know, there's no white elephants in the room anymore. You know, if we're willing to dance with the reality of I'm living with this diagnosis and what's possible here? What is all this going to look like?
Of course, I don't even know what diagnosis I'm living with, right? You know,
A, B, or C.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, whether it's multi-systems atrophy, whether it's PLS or ALS, it's for me, it's all the same.
Yeah.
You're going through, it doesn't matter what it is, you're going through the exact same processes as anyone I know with ALS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what I appreciate is you more than many are willing to explore those possibilities and potentialities and be in the reality of the circumstance. And how do I choose to live my life in a different way? Because that's the challenge. And you've done that in a really beautiful way. Because that's what you're confronted with. That's what people who are confronted with a fatal diagnosis, whatever it is, ALS or otherwise, the challenge is, okay, how do I learn to be in this world, to live my life in a different way? Because as I live, there's new norms, and how do I adapt? Not just you, but Polly, you know, and your family.
Yeah.
The more conscious we can be, the more open we can be. Because I'm telling you, the vast majority of folks aren't that open and aren't willing to inquire and dance with the reality of the circumstance they find themselves in. And hopefully we're able to help people do that in really good ways without giving advice, without coming in, you got to do this and you got to do that. Because as I told you, for me, advice is me telling you what I think you should do, and I would never, ever do that.
I found that last group was good. The men's group was good in the ways you're describing. I think it affected people in powerful ways.
Well, it's the way of counsel. So rather than advice, I'll give you counsel, or we will sit in counsel as a group where we truly listen to one another and share from the heart, and don't interrupt, don't give advice. Because again, advice is me telling people what I think they should do, and I don't want to do that. All right. We had a Beyond ALS gathering last week, I think it was, which is for people who've lost a loved one.
Oh, yes.
And though there were 8 or 9 folks on, it was, according to everybody else, incredibly powerful. People just truly dropped into this really beautiful, beautiful place and listened. And I mean, as you know, when we truly listen, there's the opportunity for one's authentic self to emerge. Authenticity is really important. And when authenticity can emerge, it allows for the space for one's vulnerable self to show up, which can be incredibly powerful. And I mean, I think that's what happened without thinking of it in the moment with the Beyond ALS. There's lots of emotions and lots of candor and just heartfelt sense of self and sharing, you know.
I felt that in the men's ALS group too.
Yeah. And, you know, for me, that's why the model that we've created, I mean, is important. And it just stems from what I've learned from my teachers, my mentors, my colleagues, and people who are my dear friends. And also from just remembering what we already know. Already, I think one of the reasons you guys, both you and Polly, are able to navigate this in the way that you do, because you innately remember. You're remembering what's in our DNA, what's in our bones, you know? Now, there's a wisdom that we have when we're born into this world, that soul piece. We know how to live and we actually know how to die. So, and I mean, it can be foreign to many people. And it's just, I haven't thought of it this way before. It's just, they don't remember. They're unable to remember. You know, I mean, that's the soul piece, I think. And there's no shame and there's no disrespect in me saying that. It's just people are in very different places. You know? So, and
I'm grateful. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, you go ahead.
Well, the delay is interesting with talking on Zoom, you know, or whatever. Yeah, we're Zooming, aren't we? Yeah. Well, I lost it, so go ahead. If you have it, you're younger.
A few years. How old are you now?
72, evidently.
So I'm about 5 years younger.
Yeah.
72, 4 or 5.
Okay.
Something like that. What I was going to say is one of the things that sustains me is being fortunate, one, in knowing the two of you and others like you. And what I mean by that is just that we can sit and drop into these places, you know, with sharing and listening to one another. And, you know, kind of honoring where we are and your ability to hear what I have to say and me, the ability to hear what you have to say and truly listen. But that's what sustains me. And I think my staff, because I mean, we work with many, many families.
I know you do. I thought about that. Just my gosh, what about all the loss? You know, like I just lost a dear friend, Christy Fairchild, died, 3 weeks ago, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
And I just thought, what's it like for Ron to lose all these people over time? It must be enormous.
Yes, but yeah, and you know, we get that a lot, right? How do you keep doing this? And for me, it's just being comfortable with the reality of my own mortality, knowing that I too one day will die. And it's that deep inquiry into what does it mean to die? What does death look like? And to remember to and remember and remember in this moment what it means, what loss looks like. So every loss we have in life is a symbolic death, if we can look at it like that. So death in that sense is a practice, whether it's the loss of a job, of a girlfriend, you know, obviously a loved one, the loss of my bicycle that got stolen, right? The loss of a job. You know, I mean, there's opportunity to explore loss and to see it as a symbolic death, along with, you know, doing that deep work. I mean, the most powerful things I did in my life was go out to the desert, you know, for 12 days, you know, and have a fast for 4 days and 4 nights.
Yeah, I've not done that, but I've heard. Yeah,
you know, there's many practices and there's many ways. I mean, Buddhism, though I'm not a Buddhist, but it's had some profound impact on the things that I've learned and remembered. First Nation, I mean, you know, back when they used to do their migrations back in the day, you know, the elders, people who were sick, those infirmed, would just sit by the trees. They would leave them and they would die. You know, death is incredibly real. And, you know, we're born into this world. And it's just, what are our theories? What are our feelings about death and dying? Right? I mean, why is it the babies come into this world, and some of them don't make it, or there's miscarriages. You know, I remember a woman, my niece had a miscarriage. And the only solace I could give her, but what I felt in my heart is, honey, that child just wasn't meant to come through yet. That's soul peace. Alrighty. So from that perspective, for me, we're born into this world, and there's a soul journey that we have to live. And it's no accident, from my perspective and my belief, in what occurs in our life, all the circumstances we find ourselves in. All the dysfunction, all the woundedness, all the tragedy. There's a soul purpose for all that. And for some, all the joy and all the beauty and the great parents, right? You know, but I mean, who knows what that is? But for me, that's what works for me. And to know that we're born into this world to live our life in whatever form, and to do what it is we're supposed to do, hopefully to be of service. Because from my perspective, that's what we're meant to do. And of course, for many of us, like myself, I'll speak for myself, I didn't truly wake up until the second half of my life, you know, just because of circumstances in my story and where I was. And that's why I like using the term remember, because we already knew all this. I mean, a lot of this I know, and I can remember as a child what I knew and what I saw. And the adult's inability to explain and to share and to bring guidance, right? To bring mentoring. You know, some of us were not fortunate enough to have mentors growing up as children. But in the second half of my life, I met, again, people who became my mentors, teachers, colleagues, and my very dear friends. So, which is a huge part of what I was able to create here with a lot of help with Compassionate Care ALS. And then to meet folks like you who nurture me, that enable me to continue doing it. Because again, we see some folks who are in such difficult circumstances on so many different levels, where it can be really hard, you know?
We're part of another group, an MSA group, and I would say some of the people with MSA are more what you're describing. They're cut off and struggling to express, don't you think? You know, some of the,
Well, there's not, I mean, in my perfect world, we would be large enough if we had the resources to, I mean, and multi-systems atrophy, we've worked with many people with MSA. I don't advertise that, but it comes through people that I'm connected with. Can you? And if we're able, we say yes. And it's just like same with PLS. You know, but there's no organization that I'm aware of in support of multi-systems atrophy and like what we do. And I mean, that's
not at all the way you do, for sure.
No. And that's why, but there should be. And if we were large enough, or, you know, we had the donors that could, you know, make that happen for us, then we would be inclusive. You know, also Huntington's disease, which is also pretty horrific.
Yes, right.
You know? So, you know, there's lots of possibilities going forward, but
well, I'm sure grateful for what you do and offer.
And ultimately, it's, you don't have to recreate the wheel, right? And because oftentimes families are so lost, can we stay on our home? What does this look like? And so that's what we do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we're very grateful. And that you don't care if it's ALS or MSA or whatever. I mean, if we had felt we would be pushed away, it would be huge.
And we're not by the clinic either. The ALS clinic still welcomes us.
Well, they're trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, you know? That's true.
Yeah.
And again, whether it's multi-systems atrophy or ALS, you have this neurological. I mean, multi-system atrophy, in my experience and my knowledge, is a much longer, can be a much longer progression.
Mhm.
All right. So,
Mhm.
Right.
and, so from that standpoint, if we have to choose between ALS or MSA, I'll stay with MSA, which doesn't mean we haven't known many people with ALS that have lived a long, long time, because we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So into a ripe old age. Anyway. So anything else I can share with you, my friend?
I feel like this is a really good connection, and I don't want to do more maybe today. How
Okay.
about that? But to be continued would be
Sure.
great.
Absolutely. We will do that.
Mm.
All righty. So we will talk soon.
Okay. Blessings, Ron.
Me
Love you
too.
both.
Love you too.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
You've made a big difference in our life.
Cheers.
For sure.
Yeah.
And you and mine. And you and mine.
Okay.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Mm.